the education. And yes, I'm going to post the PowerPoint on Blackboard after class. It's actually already up there, but I just haven't made it available yet. So I will make it available after class. It is written by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or what we say NAEYC to shorten it because it's easier to say. And it gives guidelines for what is responsible behavior in early childhood. So it helps us to know what is responsible. So it helps us also to know how to resolve ethical dilemmas. So it helps us to know what to do when there are tricky situations in early childhood. So it helps us to work with families and children. What are ethics? You know, we're thinking about ethics. What really are ethics? To begin answering that question, we have to think about values and morality, professional core values, ethics, professional ethics, ethical responsibilities and dilemmas, those kind of things. So that's what we're going to really look at today to get an understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about ethics. So your values are, what do you value? So values are things that you think are desirable, things that you think are prized. Okay, so let's do this. I have a poll, and I want you to answer these questions. There's no right or wrong answer for each one. It's just a value. Each one says which is better, and pick the one you think would be better. And I'll, just take your time and look at each one. And click the poll, click the one you think. There's 4 questions.
I see it as the next slide, so I'm not able to click on the word.
And when it comes to ethics, some questions are pretty hard to answer. Yeah, you should be able to click on the poll. But I don't know It's not showing up for you. That's weird. Yeah, I noticed some people are typing in the chat, so I'm not sure
Dr. Taylor, it's
why it
saying
shows up for some and not for others.
next slide, so we
I'll have
can't
to find
click
that
on it.
out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And can you see the results? Some people say yes, some people say no. So the result says, which is better, 100% of the people who took the poll says it's better to be good than to be rich. That's interesting. So I guess people in this class that answered the poll felt like it's better to be good than to be rich. So I kind of want to be rich, but no, but it is, that is really a tough question, because it would be nice to be rich, but yeah, I mean, you think when you're trying to answer a question like that, that's pretty tough. Which is better, to be smart or to be moral? 90% of the people said it'd be better to be moral. So that's interesting too. And this one's a tough one. Which would be better, to steal or to go hungry? So think about if you had, and some of you have children, if you had a child that was really hungry and he or she was crying, would you steal to get your child food? That's a tough question, isn't it? Because if you have children, a lot of you as mothers would do a lot of things for your children, wouldn't you? I mean, you don't really know what you would do in situations if you were in you think about countries where, people don't have a lot, we're lucky where we are. But in some countries, think about you might, even here, there might be a situation where, which would be better, to lie or to hurt someone's feelings? And this was 50-50. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because say one of your best friends comes up to you and she has this new dress on and she's like all happy and everything, and she says, "Hey, what do you think about my new dress? Oh, don't you love it? I just got it on sale. I love it. It looks so good on me. What are you thinking?" And you're going, "Oh my gosh, that's a hideous thing. I mean, that's the ugliest dress I've ever seen in my life." I mean, what do you say to her? It's like you don't want to hurt her feelings. So do you just lie and say, "Oh yeah, it's great," I mean, all of us have probably done that at one time or another. We probably said, "Oh yeah, girl, that looks great," You probably lied and said, because you didn't want to hurt her feelings, you know? So we probably told lies like that. So these are hard questions to really think about. And that's, sort of the next slide, is just thinking about those kind of things. So those are morals, are your values. I mean, those are your values. What do what do you think? So let's look at these things, and I do have a poll for this too, but if the poll doesn't work, you can write in the chat box. Which ones do you value the most? So I've got a poll for this too. So pick the 3 that you value the most. I don't know if this is in the way of and it should scroll down. You can even, is this poll in the way of the slide? And you can scroll down, there's more when you go down. And again, some of you may not be able to see the poll. Yeah, I see some people are still just seeing a slide. Okay, let's take a few more seconds, try to click in your answers. Okay, here's the results. We've got a big 90% on family, 50% on education, 10% on religion, 70% happiness, 40% honesty, 40% health. So you can kind of see we've got nothing on friendship or doing good or creativity or beauty, but it's really difficult to kind of think of which ones to put first, isn't it? You know, to kind of think what would be, and my quiz didn't have enough spaces for me to put everything that was on the slide. So I left off some of the things that were on the slide, but it is kind of difficult, but it's interesting that we had a lot with family. And looking at the chat, we kind of had some of the same things, but we had some beauty in the chat. That's interesting. And somebody had the meaningful work. I think that's good too. And the environment. So that's interesting. Okay, so that gives us an idea, but between the one we just did and then this one now, that gives an idea of what people value in the class and what, you know, what we would do in certain situations. So that shows us some of our values in the class. Morality. This is what people's view is of what is right and what is proper and how people should behave. This is what is fair, what is just. And people have different ideas about this because you could just watch the news and tell this. Because what one person thinks is fair, another person may not think is fair, right? So we all have different ideas about what is fair and how people should behave, even how children should behave. So that can cause conflict a lot of times, especially with parents in the classroom. ethics. This is the study of what's right and wrong. And it's also including the choices that we make between values and morals. So ethics is a really interesting subject, but it is a little controversial sometimes. And when you watch the news, you can see a lot of ethical things that are happening in the news. So this is very applicable to what has been happening in the world. But let's apply this to the classroom, because that's what you need to know for the future. So think about a situation where a parent of a child in your class tells you that she is having difficulty in her marriage. Your best friend, who is another parent in that same class, but she happens to be your best friend, she kind of suspects this woman's having marital problems. So she says, "Oh, give me some information about this parent. I think she's having some marital difficulties." So then you tell her a little bit about it, about this other parent, because she's your best friend, you just tell her a little bit about because you're the teacher in the class and you figure, well, I'll just tell her a little bit. So do you think this is ethical or not ethical? Okay, I think you already have the idea. Great. All right. So these are the kind of things we are going to be doing in the class. It's definitely not ethical. Even though she's your best friend, you don't share these things. I mean, yeah, she is your best friend and she might say, "Well, thanks a lot. You're not going to tell me anything. Well, I thought we were good friends," and make you feel guilty. And and you say, "I'm sorry, I just can't," because you can even point to this. This is one of the principles. They call them principles, and you can tell because it has a P in front of it. That stands for principle. And this is one of the things out of the Code of Ethics that you looked through the other day. And it says, "We shall maintain confidentiality and we will respect the family's right to privacy. So we will not disclose information." So that means we won't tell other people information. It doesn't matter if it's our best friend or not. We don't give that information out about other parents or other children in our classroom. So we can look to the code. So if we were thinking, is it okay to tell my best friend? I'm not really sure because I feel like she's my best friend and she's not going to really tell anybody else. So you could look in the code and see what it says. And then you read this, that gives your answer right there. No, I don't tell anybody. This is not right. And you can even share this with your friend. You say, "This is what I follow. I follow this code and I'm sorry. I know we're best friends, but I really have to be confidential with this matter." So let's look at another thing. So you're in the teacher's lounge and you hear a coworker and she's making an insulting joke about children and families of a certain ethical group. So you just sit there and you don't say anything because, it's like, I really don't want to say anything because you're kind of embarrassed to confront her. You really just let it go, it's no big deal. So do you think it's ethical or not to just be quiet and not say anything? Okay, you're right. It's not ethical. And this is difficult also, but the code says, this is another principle. It says, when you have concerns about a coworker, you first let that person know about your concern. And it might be good to maybe say something to this person, in private, maybe not in front of everybody, but in private, and, say something to her, but I probably wouldn't do it out in front of everybody. But some people say, well, I'll just go right to the director and tell that director what she's saying. But the code says the way we handle it is we go to the coworker first. Now, if this coworker continues to go on and on and on and just does this constantly, then yeah, you probably are going to have to go to the director. If you've already talked to the coworker and they continue to do it, then yeah. But your first step is to go to the coworker. And that's hard because you want to be friends with the coworker, and when you talk to people, they get upset, don't they? Sometimes. And then they're like, what are you telling me for? Okay, professional ethics. The commitments of a profession, sorry. This basically enhances the morality practitioners bring to their work and the actions of right or wrong in the workplace. And they help resolve moral dilemmas. So it's good for our profession that we have something in place to help us to make good decisions. So ethical responsibilities and ethical dilemmas. Ethical responsibilities are behaviors that one must or must not enact. Ethical responsibilities are clear cut and they're spelled out in the Code of Ethical Conduct. Something like never share confidential information about a child or a family. And then ethical dilemmas are a moral conflict. And that is when there's conflicting values about a responsibility and you're not really sure what to do. You could go either way with a decision. So a responsibility is when you have to do this. This is a right or wrong decision. A dilemma is when you have a choice. You could do this or that, and you could, make two different decisions. So what does the Code of Ethics do for us? Well, it gives us a sense of identity. It helps identify the issues, and it communicates those with those from the outside the profession. So it tells other people, this is what you can expect from us. This is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to live by. The code was prepared by a commission, and then it went through a 5-year process, and then it was approved. It's been a while back, like 1989, and it had another set of revisions in 1992, and then another set 1997. So then it started every 5 years to be revised so it stays up to date. So the goal of the code is to inform, and it helps you to answer tough questions, and it's supposed to be a guide to help you to make decisions in the classroom. So the Code of Ethical Conduct has core values or principles that sort of like we talked about, things that we believe are important. And it has a conceptual framework, and it has ideals. They reflect what the aspirations of the practitioners believe. Basically, ideals in the code, you probably saw them, they have an I in front of them. And that's basically what a perfect practice would be. What NAEYC believes would be the perfect ideal situation. And then principles are the intended guide to conduct and how you should resolve ethical dilemmas. So just like I said before, the code helps you in decision making and to make professional judgments. So instead of you just kind of making some crazy decision with a child or a parent, this way you're making a sound decision and you understand that you've got something to back you up. So you probably noticed that the code is divided in these different sections. There's responsibilities to children, families, your colleagues, the people that you work with, and then community and society. And then there's a statement of commitment. Here's how we work with a problem. We look for guidance in the code, and then we see, is there some kind of legal dimension to it? If there's some kind of legal aspect, we may have to go contact an attorney or a lawyer. If not, then we decide some course of action, and then we can resolve the issue. What should an educator do? You think about the situation, decide if it's a dilemma or a responsibility, use the code for guidance, decide who you have responsibility to, and then what kind of guidance is in the code, and what would a good early childhood educator do? So let's look at this scenario. A child comes in with a hand-shaped bruise on the side of his face. So, you're looking like this, looks like it got slapped in the face. So when you're thinking about it, is this just something like, I really don't have to do anything about it? Or is this a true responsibility? What would you think? Do we need to do something about this? Or can we just say, probably don't need it? Yeah. We need to do something. We need to look into it, don't we? It's a responsibility. Okay. So who are we responsible to? Think about, is it the child? Is it the family? Is it the community? Is it our coworkers? Yes, the child. This concerns the child, okay? So obviously, you're going to go to the guide and look in the section about the child. So you'd go into the section about the child and you'd find what principle or ideal deals with this type of scenario. So these are two that I found that deal with this situation. And this P1.1 is one of the most important ones. And they say this is the most important one, as a matter of fact. And it says, above all, we shall not harm children. We shall not participate in practices that are emotionally damaging, physically harmful, disrespectful, degrading, dangerous, exploitative, or intimidating to children. So we know from this print on the child's face that this child might have been harmed. We don't know for sure, but we know, and those of you that work in childcare, you know, you don't have to have proof. You just have to have suspicion that something has happened. So this P 1.9 says when we have reasonable cause, and we do have reasonable cause to suspect child abuse or neglect, we shall report it to the appropriate community agency. So this is the time when you talk to your director and then you make a decision, do we report this or not? So this is how we use the code. So this is another scenario. The parents of a 3-year-old want his teachers to move him to the 4-year-old's class. But the teachers do not think that, oh, he is ready. Sorry, this is supposed to be ready. Is this a real responsibility, or is this just a dilemma? Does this really matter? I mean, is this something we just really have to do, or is this sort of like, just, yeah, it's just a dilemma. You're right. It's just a dilemma. This is just something, you know, the parents want it. We're not really sure. So who do we owe, who are we responsible to in this situation? Are we, is it the community? No, not really. Is it the family? Is it the child? Yeah, definitely the child and the family too, because we're dealing with the family here, right? Because they want something, and the child too, because we got to do what's best for the child. So there's two things going on here. The family wants something, but we got to do what's best for the child. So we can look in either one of these sections to kind of decide. So what I did is I looked in both of the sections, and I found something more related to the child. So I found something that talked about child development, and then I found something else that talked about the abilities and potentials of the child. So what I thought was most important is the child's development and his abilities and what his potential was, to really look at the child and say, is this child really ready? So I thought that was more important than the parents' wants. So to look at that and make the decision based on that, and then really sit down with the family and have a good discussion and see if we could come to some kind of agreement together. And so when you're making these kind of decisions, it's always good to include the family and have a two-way discussion. And so you don't want to just say no immediately and just say, nope, can't do it. Sorry, we don't do that at our school. But have a discussion with the family and include them and show them what evidence you have about the child. Because you know, some of you who work in childcare, a lot of parents think their childs are geniuses, don't they? And they're not. I know, I worked in a lot of schools, and a lot of parents think, oh, my child is so much smarter than all the rest of these children. And a lot of times they're not. And we have to kind of, you know, show them where their child is developmentally and help them understand that. So why is the code important to early childhood? It's important for all these reasons to help us to make these really good decisions, these tough decisions. So that last one was just a dilemma, right? So even when we have dilemmas, we can still go back to the code and look for things that can guide us. So that wasn't something that we really had to deal with. I mean, we could have just told the parent no. And if we had a rule in our handbook that said, you know, we don't do that at this school, we could go back to our handbook and say we don't. And then because when you introduce a family to your school, you should go through the handbook. You should explain the policies and procedures of your center and tell the families so that they know, don't ask to move your child up before the certain time because we don't do that. And if they know that ahead of time, then they know not to ask because we don't do that. But if that's not in your handbook, then, you know, there may be a question about, can we do that? So, you know, there are times when you use the code just to help you out, even when it isn't a real responsibility, like the child abuse situation. During this class, you will have some other scenarios that you will practice doing, just like we did this one. You'll have some things to select from, some different principles and ideals to select from and get some practice doing this.